Breaking news, we're following the Vatican once again announcing the death of Pope Francis. He was 88 years old, passed away 7:35 local time, Vatican City, which was about 1 a.m., shortly after 1 a.m. our time. Let's get back out to Greg Payne. He is live for us this morning with the Life, the Legacy, looking back in his time here in Philadelphia as well. Greg.
Yeah, good morning, Thomas. I mean, one of the things that you had mentioned in some of the earlier hits was in regards to Pope Francis offering the blessing yesterday. And I mean, when I looked it up, Pope Francis, he actually, because of the pneumonia, he hadn't been able to talk for quite some time. So, I mean, it was highly impressive to see that he delivered this blessing. And as we talked about it before, it was an encouraging sight for a lot of folks thinking that, okay, he's going to recover from this. But of course, hearing this devastating news, the shocking news that now has just, surfaced all across social media and people are waking up to this news, it is quite the shock. Now, let's go over a little bit in regards to the history of Pope Francis. We'll first talk about those health concerns. Now, Pope Francis had been recently battling some major health concerns, including double pneumonia. After spending 38 days in the hospital, he was discharged and returned to the Vatican to continue his recovery. According to the Associated Press, Cardinal Kevin Farrell says at 7:35 this morning, the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to the home of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and of his church. Now, due to the pneumonia, as I had mentioned, Pope Francis, he didn't have the ability to speak for quite some time. So yesterday was very special, especially since this year is a Jubilee year, also known as a holy year for the Catholic Church. Now, from the day he was elected in 2013, Pope Francis forever changed the Vatican. Fox 29 was there when he was announced to the world as the 266th pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, 2 years after he was elected, Francis made his first and only trip to the United States. In September of 2015, Pope Francis spent the final 2 days of his 10-day North American trip in Philadelphia, which we will have much more on that visit and our coverage of that historic visit. And as you would expect, many now are asking that question, what are the next steps over the next several days in regards to this? Well, the cardinals will all come to Rome to mourn. Then the Pope's body will be put on display in St. Peter's Basilica or St. Peter's Square so people can pay respects. A funeral mass will be offered by the Cardinal Dean, and after that, the cardinals will meet before going into the conclave, where the cardinals under 80 years old will eventually vote for the next successor of Pope Francis. So, I mean, quite the process, Thomas, over the next few days. They're saying this is probably going to take all the stuff that I was talking in regards to the next steps will probably take in around 9 or more days. But like I said, this news really coming as a shock, even despite the health concerns, despite the age of being 88 years old, still sending a lot of shockwaves, especially as people are now starting to wake up and hearing this news. Thomas?
Yeah, certainly is a lot to unfold, as you noted. Greg, thank you so much.
This is the Nation's Conspire channel. Welcome to today's show. As most of you know, Pope Francis has died at the age of 88 years old, and they've reported for a few months that he's been sick. But of course, we know most of these people don't really exit the world. They just exit the world stage when they make these types of announcements. Same with Queen Elizabeth. It's probably very likely that they selected this day by design because, of course, many people out there saying how fitting that the Pope would pass away on Easter, not even knowing that Easter, which is really Ishtar's holiday, a pagan holiday that, of course, Christians celebrate in accordance with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Many of these people are looking at it as if it's symbolic, but there's a lot of coincidences that are surrounding this specific story. There's going to be a lot of things to unfold in the coming days and weeks and months, including the selection of the new pope. And I will get into the prophecy of the popes in a little bit in this video. And if you're not familiar with the prophecies of the Pope, you need to become familiar with it, because the prophecies of the Pope declare that Pope Francis was the last Pope that would ever exist before the coming of Judgment Day. But let's start with some of these very strange coincidences, right? So, of course, Pope Francis dies just after Easter. They're saying it happened on April 21st or towards the end of Easter evening. And all these things are now trending on Twitter, which is important to pay attention to, including Satan, the Antichrist, Pope Francis, and conclave. Now, Antichrist is important for many reasons, because there's many people that believe that the Antichrist comes out of Rome, that the Antichrist will in fact be the Pope, potentially the next Pope. There's always going to be theories about who the Antichrist is and who the Antichrist could potentially be. And of course, there's many people that believe that there's many Antichrists. There's a lot of theories that surround the Antichrist. But everybody out there should be familiar that at the top of the pyramid, there are two specific people who are calling the shots: the Vatican and Israel. And what we see here is clearly being done by design. They selected this day, and at the same time that Pope Francis exits the stage, what happens? Well, Pope Francis on Easter morning met with Vice President J.D. Vance. Is that a coincidence that J.D. Vance and America are going to be somehow lumped into this story of the Pope's passing, and how the Pope was a big critic of the Trump administration, and J.D. Vance just happened to be at the Vatican meeting with the Pope on Easter morning? He even tweeted out today, "I met with the Holy Father, Pope Francis. I am grateful for his invitation to meet, and I pray for his good health." Hours later, the Pope supposedly is gone. At the same time, look at the stories that are out there, because you could start to see where this is headed with this Trump hysteria. Klaus Schwab, I've covered this before, okay? They've told us multiple times that Klaus Schwab was stepping down from the World Economic Forum. Well, as of this morning, as the Pope supposedly passes away and exits the stage, so does Klaus Schwab. All of the mainstream media outlets are now reporting that it is official. Klaus Schwab has officially stepped down as the World Economic Forum chair. And you might say, well, that's very coincidental, right? Well, of course, there's no such thing as actual coincidences. So the Pope exits, right? The Pope, who is a critic of Donald Trump, who MAGA does not support, because the Pope obviously has openly called for acceptance of the LGBT. I've covered all the stuff with the Pope over the years, including the one world religion, which I'll break down in separate videos. But MAGA doesn't support the Pope because the Pope has openly criticized Trump, and they don't like that. So the Pope passes away. Klaus Schwab, who all of these MAGA people believe is stepping away because they fear, and he fears, Donald Trump. Even though Donald Trump goes to Davos, he speaks at Davos, Klaus speaks glowingly of Trump, Trump speaks glowingly of Klaus. They all believe that Klaus Schwab stepping down has something to do with Donald Trump and getting rid of globalism, right? You see the tie-ins here and the timing of this, with J.D. Vance being there, with the Pope exiting the stage at the same time that Klaus Schwab exits the stage. These are people who are put out there as being in opposition of MAGA and Donald Trump. And don't forget that very strange photo, which I did a video on many years ago, where Donald Trump and his wife, Melania, and Ivanka met with the Pope, and they're all wearing black. There's a lot of symbolism in that photo as well. So now we look at what comes next, right? Because people out there are going to say, well, the next Pope, if there is another Pope, that the next Pope will be somebody who is ultra conservative, because this Pope, obviously Pope Francis, was very opposite of that. And now MAGA is saying we need to get somebody ultra conservative who is so anti-LGBT and so anti-this and so anti and so pro-Trump. We need to get the next Pope in there. These people continue to have this Pope man worship. It's incredible the amount of people that, drop to their knees and kiss the ring of the Pope. And they somehow tie this into the Bible as if the Bible gives you instructions on a Pope and how you're supposed to worship a man. I mean, the Bible's pretty clear about not worshiping man, not putting your hope in man. But somehow these people it goes right over their head. You see people crying. You'll see all the videos coming out in the coming days of people outside of the Vatican laying flowers, praying. You'll see it all, right? But the next thing that I'm sure is a coincidence as well is now how the next Pope is chosen, and that's called the conclave. And if anybody out there is not familiar, conveniently, this past year, a film called Conclave came out. And the purpose of that film was to teach people how the process goes in selecting a Pope, right? Because remember, these films are used as a tool, predictive programming, training people on how to behave when an event actually occurs that the government simulates, and to train you. Because now we're going to hear nothing more day in and day out about who the next pope is, right? This will be a nice distraction for them to put out there while they're doing all these other things that are all globalist plans, right? Conclave taught all of the people out there who saw it, they conveniently nominated for an Oscar, how the process works. So now all these people are going to say, well, who's the new pope going to be? And they're going to say, well, we know the process, right? So-and-so's got to vote, so-and-so's got to vote. The plot of the film is Cardinal Lawrence as one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, participating in the selection of a new pope, surrounded by powerful religious leaders in the halls of the Vatican. He soon uncovers a trail of deep secrets that could shake the very foundation of the Roman Catholic Church. And of course, it's revealed in the film that one of the people or the person who is selected was actually a male who was born with a uterus and ovaries. Of course, why not throw in that insane plot twist into it as well? Because it just plays into everybody out there who gets sucked into these psyops about genders and gender equality and can a female be a pope and can a female be a priest. But the Conclave film was put out by design to train people about how this process goes. And conveniently now we're going to go through the process, right? Now, the other thing people have to pay attention to, in addition to potentially this very ultra-conservative pope being selected who will align himself with Trump, we talk about the Antichrist and the false prophet. But the other thing that's out there that most people are not familiar about is the prophecy of the popes. So the prophecy of the popes, if you're not familiar, is a 900-year-old book in the Vatican, okay? This is a book in the Vatican, which lists all of the popes before they actually occurred. So it shows you that this is scripted, it's staged out conveniently. Every pope that was going to come in the future, all the ones who were supposedly selected by a conclave, all their names actually lined up. And the last pope written in that book was Pope Francis, and it says, after the death of Pope Francis, the end of the world will come. This, again, is the prophecy of the popes. And some of the things that, of course, are not coincidental because this stuff is written out and planned in advance is if you actually look at St. Paul's Basilica. I'm sure some of you have seen that famous border of every pope in history, and each one has their own spot, has their face on the wall, and there's just one spot left next to Pope Francis. There was a time where there were many of those spots just open and waiting, and they built this out ahead of time. Nobody said, whoa, wait, what happens when we run out of space? They said, oh, well, we will run out of space because we know who the last pope will be, and we'll have an open spot waiting on that wall. And will we eventually fill it? Well, only time will tell. But that book, The Prophecy of the Popes, also says that the death of the 112th pope will lead to Judgment Day in the year 2027. This is from a 12th century prophecy. Now, is it a prophecy or is this something that's been planned out, that they scripted out in advance? And Pope Francis is precisely the 112th pope. So again, the book says that the death of the 112th pope will lead to Judgment Day in the year 2027. Pope Francis was the 112th pope. And after his death, the seven-hilled city will be destroyed and the dreadful judge will judge the people. The end. That's what's in this book. We know about programming. We know how things are planned out in advance. And we'll see how this entire thing plays out. But pay attention to these types of narratives. Because remember, there could be a simulation that's going on here. They could be obviously simulating this out. As Christians, we have to be aware of these things because we can see that they're baiting us in. We can see they've baited us in America by gaslighting us with all these stories about trans and Christians losing free speech. And what's happened on the flip side? Well, Donald Trump has come in, and all we've heard about is that he's been chosen by God to save America, right? Well, conveniently, the head of the Pope, Pope Francis, hates Donald Trump, has been opposed to Donald Trump. So these conservatives now are thrilled that there's going to be a new pope, hoping that he aligns with Donald Trump. And conveniently, of all the world leaders who met with the Pope on the day of his death, somehow it was our Vice President, J.D. Vance, who was over there coincidentally for Easter at the same exact time of the Pope's death. The face of globalism, the face of the New World Order, as we know it today, is Klaus Schwab. Whenever anybody thinks now of the New World Order, yeah, you think of Billy Gates. Everybody thinks of Klaus Schwab and the Dr. Evil persona that he puts out there. And he coincidentally, right, we've heard all the stories that he's stepping down, it's coming. They throw the story out there every now and then. Well, now it's official. On 4/21, as the Pope passes away, that Klaus is stepping down. And MAGA's thinking that all this stuff is happening because God took the Pope away because the Pope didn't support Donald Trump. And Klaus Schwab is afraid of Donald Trump, even though they're best buddies, and he's stepping down, right? So you could see a swarm of psyops potentially coming out of this. And don't forget that conclave theory, movie being out there. That's how they do this stuff. Nobody knew, for the most part. I mean, people like us might know how the process goes with the Vatican, but the common person had no idea how a pope is selected. So what do? They slap an Oscar nomination on it. They tell you, ooh, it's got gender undertones and all that stuff. People run to see the movie. A lot of people did go see it. A lot of atheists, a lot of people out there. It's quote unquote critically acclaimed. Those are the types of things they tag to the movies to get people to go and watch them. A lot of people will go watch these movies just based on if they're nominated for an Oscar or not, especially if they're atheist or somebody who questions Christianity, questions the church, right? They want to see the corruption in the church. So all these people went and got trained into how this process is about to go in regards to the conclave and who the next pope will be if we even get another pope, because this could carry out. This could carry out. They could make this go on for months and everybody's infighting about who it should be and everyone's kind of distracted by it. And then you'll probably hear in the mainstream the prophecy of the popes. Would it surprise anyone? I mean, they have covered it before. And conveniently, of course, that book, which was written in the year 1143 and supposedly is hidden in the Vatican archives, but it's out there for all of us to know about, predicted every single pope accurately, all the way up to Pope Francis. So every pope from 1143 to now, this book had written out in advance. And conveniently, we're supposed to believe that each time a pope was supposedly selected or elected to be the pope, this book knew about it. So people go, well, the book is prophetic, right? And then at the end, it says that Pope Francis is going to be the last pope before Judgment Day. And then we just get Pope Francis, and Pope Francis is gone. While we have all of this other stuff going on psychologically with Donald Trump being aligned with God, divine intervention, God chose him. There are massive deceptions that are going to be coming out of this Pope Francis exiting the stage, because that's really what this is. These people exit the stage. You wouldn't know if they were dead or alive. They make an announcement, just like with the news. Everybody takes it as if it's valid. Oh, he's dead. Oh, he just died this morning. Oh, he was so holy. He died on Resurrection Day. And everyone just takes these stories, right? And then, of course, they throw you J.D. Vance in there. And the Democrats are like, J.D. Vance probably killed him. He's probably the Antichrist, right? There are so many deceptions that are going to be tied into this, which I'll be covering in the coming weeks and days. But pay attention to that story in regards to the prophecy of the popes, and think about all this other stuff and how it aligns with deceptions that can potentially be coming. And don't forget, too, on top of that, which I covered months ago, that ritual that Pope Francis did, opening the 5 sacred portals on Christmas Eve, that ritual that they say had never been done before, where he was just banging on those doors, including the tomb of Lucifer, or as they, like to pretend it's not the tomb of Lucifer, even though the Vatican map shows you a tomb of Lucifer, and they say, well, it's not really Lucifer's tomb, right? Lots of weird, strange things surrounding it. So I'll continue to cover it. I want to just get a video out, letting everybody out there know about it. You have conclave trending, Antichrist trending, Satan trending, and all these other stories that I'm sure are coincidences surrounding the popes exiting stage left. And if you look closely at the narratives, this is going to tie in heavily to the United States of America. So is this the last pope? Will psyops come? We'll see. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you, as always, and your families.